Hi, my name is Ricardo Lezama. I'm a computational linguist with over 10 years of experience in the artificial intelligence and information technology space. I started in 2013, shortly after graduating from the University of California with a degree in linguistics and a minor in philosophy and psychology. Those things are relevant for the AI space as far as the subject matter expert aspect of it is concerned. I have, like I mentioned, a decade of experience in this space, and I want to talk to you about all the different impacts and novel things that can happen with AI and ChatGPT like products. Now, before we get into it, I want to tell you about how it's very important that these tools be as democratic or as accessible as possible. Now, with the new groups that are in power and in control of today's economy and political space, we should be mindful that technofascism is a very real and potentially devastating thing for our communities. Large language models were principally designed for English and now are being designed to automate many tasks that users from the US or other economies that have English as a primary language for business interact with these tools, which is cutting out groups that used to traditionally create value through non-automated interactions with customers, data, and so on. What I need to tell you today is that those tools could be very useful for communities that are oftentimes underserved or underprioritized with their lexicon and their priorities. And so what I mean is the Chicano community within the California, Southwestern United States area could benefit greatly from having our own large language models, which is just something that we happen to have at LCN. Um, I mentioned my technical and academic background. I'm also doing a master's in computer science with an emphasis in artificial intelligence, mostly because the curriculum today actually reflects the priorities of today, whereas maybe 5 or even just 3 years ago, computer science degrees were telling you foundational concepts in computer science, no doubt, and in computational thinking, but the industry could sort of nudge you in the direction that you needed to go as far as software engineering techniques and so on. So you kind of learn on the job more easily. With artificial intelligence, the vanguard has changed, and in fact, accessibility to these data and large language models created by the data um, is the first way to know exactly how to use generative AI, the type of AI that powers ChatGPT. But now, as we move forward in this new ChatGPT like space, um, we need different types of technical training, which is, just to share with you, the reader, sorry, um, why I am motivated to engage a master's in computer science now as opposed to 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, right? The industry has always nudged us in the direction we need to go to, as I said. And I think this video could serve as an introduction for new linguists, Chicano linguists, Mexican linguists who are trying to engage the space from their own vantage point and don't know where to start, or maybe do know where to start, but don't necessarily know how to apply it within industry. And industry will always tell you what they need through their hiring procedures. I also want to propose a third way where we create data sets for our own purposes in our own communities, which is a priority for LCN or lacartita.com. We have over 7,500 documents that have been annotated with different categories. And this data set allows us to create classifiers that identify headlines and topics for them. That also means that we can do processes like language identification with the vocabulary that is common for Mexican American, Mexican, Hispanic communities. And I think that'll be useful down the line as we start looking at tools that not only personalize the experience, but also take into account the collective condition of communities and the priorities of communities, right? So we have data sets, for example, that focus on femicide, which is a huge problem in all of Latin America. We have a huge data set that focuses on the drug war because we need to understand what on Twitter, what on Blue Sky is happening that could touch our communities in such a way. And I think as we move towards a future where there's so much data that we need other specialized data sets to analyze it, we're going to realize that we need these data sets, and we'll be glad that data sets like LCN have been made available to the community or been at least hinted at as a possibility for design and architecture for downstream uses. So that's who I am. That's my background. That's my motivation and my current ongoing project. Obviously, like many of you, I have a day job. And so when I have concern about the intersection of technology with respect to the Chicano community, I do that to enable and empower my potential colleagues and my current colleagues who I haven't met yet, right? That's who other technologists who are Chicano and who are in this space are, to me at least. But yeah, that's who I am. That's what I do. That's what I'm focused on as my project. Now, what I want to share with you today is, in the next 5 minutes, this video won't be too long, is how we can interpret the arrival of people who are also very much aware about large language models and generative AI and, this type of specialized technology, and what their plans are for the technology and how they want to push the world or how they want to nudge the direction of development. And specifically, I want to talk about Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a very polemical figure. We saw him do the Nazi salute on Sunday, or was it Monday? I forget. But the point is that the gentleman decided to do a Nazi salute 2 times, one towards, I think, the audience and the second time towards the flag. And that's who is in charge of one of the secondary models called Grok. And that model is primarily powered by the overwhelmingly large funnel of data from the X, formerly Twitter community. And so what Elon has for free through his users is a large volume of not only all the text that is relevant at the moment, but also all the text that has been relevant in the past. And I think with his large language models, there is a lot of merit to the newness and freshness of the data. The only thing is that because of his personality, his politics, his obvious facets, ambitions, he's turning away a lot of users, and they're moving on to platforms like Blue Sky, which I mentioned earlier. And those are also accessible for your purposes as well. You can build a call to the Blue Sky API and access that data for your own purposes. And that's just something I want to mention to you. X, for instance, used to be that way, but then with Elon and his rush to create a semi-profitable venture, because it got redesigned, right? It went from public, which allows them to create and load up on a lot of debt, to private, which necessitates that you be a entirely for-profit operation, and not a speculative value over the share price. So when the change was made, obviously they had to cut and try to find new avenues for revenue. And so that kind of was motivated his pricing out of many people, including academics who studied hate speech, because obviously that's not a priority for someone who's a loud and proud Nazi. But so that's who is one of the key figures in the AI space. He has a large language model through the Grok platform, and that large language model is composed and updated continuously with the new Twitter data from users who are providing it to him for free by just commenting and using the platform as usual. And so that's something that you have to be mindful as any community, African American, Mexican, groups who are marginalized. If you're having your conversations on that platform, you're also permitting him to leverage your data, and then possibly or probably helping target your community with in-group users, or at least with the in-group language, so that they can fine-tune their message so that you agree with them much more easily. Because they know you because you told them about how you speak, how you conceive of things, and you've helped them not only redefine their data sets, but also how to propagandize to you much more efficiently. That's one of the dangers of using X right now, as I see it. You're helping him fine-tune his message and his propaganda, and you're helping him essentially gaslight your community with their own vernacular. Unfortunately, that's something that's going to be recurring during this administration. And as we get sharper about the use of AI and propaganda and the use of analytics to continuously monitor and fine-tune the lie, because it's not debatable that Trump and his allies lie at all times. But what we have to look at is what shade of lie are they providing us? What kind of tone at that moment are they providing us? Are they going to the center and pretending to be affable, likable people? Or are they going to the right to appeal to people who are really focused on asset prices? Are they going to the authoritarian right, where they're going to really focus on the deportation and criminalization of massive swaths of people, and then not even dog whistle, but really just whistle towards their most racist cohorts to attack and be hostile to the communities that are affected by that militant stance against non-whites, right? So that is something that the data that you provide on X is something that you have to be mindful of when it comes to dealing with Musk and his politics. And if you don't want to help him, then don't use the platform. That is the clearest indication for you to not help him. That is the clearest way to not help him. Sorry, I jumbled my words there, but the point is that if you want a way to not help him in his totalitarian dreams, right? He's modeled a lot of his technological ambitions on what was fantasies of the Germans in the 40s, right? Like the obsession with rockets and payloads, etc., and purchasing his way into SpaceX innovations and then calling them his own. That's basically him trying to recreate himself as someone like Werner von Braun, right? People who were members of the the Nazi party, and then made their way into the NASA space program. So maybe that's why they call it NASA or something. Maybe that's why the acronym is the way it is. But the point is that Musk has certain ambitions, and if you don't want to help him, don't use the platform. That's one of the best ways to get away from this guy. Don't use the platform too much. I mean, maybe check it out for scoping out news and so on. I know I do that, but I don't post much. And in fact, I don't even have one in my personal name. So that just tells you that I'm not really trying to help him with his micro targeting. And ever since Musk took over control of the platform, and he's gotten better at identifying messaging that contradicts his global aura or his global worldview, right? So if I put something that's violent and negative about Mexico, that's going to go right through the roof in terms of usage and metrics and reach. But if I put something that is maybe politically anathema to someone who wants to run a really militant and racist deportation campaign, well, that's going to get 6 views, right? Because you can see the analytics on the tweets. And so that tells me too that over time they've learned how to block messages and propagate others because there's a political concept around them that they support. And you could be totally against what they're for, but because you're working within their platform, maybe inadvertently providing him with the insight he needs to accomplish his political goals. That's Musk. He's also purchased lots of the NVIDIA GPUs. NVIDIA is a fairly neutral company when it comes to their downstream uses. If anything, I think that CEO Jensen Huang is very carefully, because he's a publicly traded, he's a CEO for a publicly traded company. He has responsibilities like employees and so on. And for all intents and purposes, from what I see, he's a demanding boss, but he doesn't do mass layoffs. He just doesn't hire and overhire and fire and so on. It's a careful, methodical guy. And from what I see, he's someone who's trying to walk a tightrope of neutrality. For instance, he avoided the inauguration and was in Asia for a routine trip, but routine trips can be canceled, delayed, etc. So this guy wanted to get away from the situation, wanted to be above the fray. That's a person you can trust. Nevertheless, has to supply Musk as much as he has to supply Google, as much as he has to supply Meta, etc. So Musk has bought up as many NVIDIAs as he can, created a large, essentially GPU farm in places like Texas, and I believe it's Texas, where he's using a lot of the water to cool down these. And there's images of a fan and so on where it's a little bit more environmentally friendly, but I don't think that. I think there's a lot of ambiguities around how the ecological cost of these processes is going to play out. But the point is that he has access to a lot of GPUs for the ends that I mentioned earlier. So that's Musk's technological power, at least a fragment of it. There's also the massive surveillance operation he has running through Tesla. Tesla has tons of cameras, tons of telemetry that reports on not only the user driving the vehicle, but the cars around them. And then if you consider that this open fastest is now connected with the government and has many contracts that you and I as taxpayers, real taxpayers, pay for, then you'll see that he can quickly turn on certain modules from those vehicles and basically turn off certain civil liberties that we all come to expect. Obviously, when you're in public, you don't have a right to certain privacy, but you don't expect them to take it so far in terms of telemetry that they beam out to various law enforcement agencies and so on. And with deportation in the mind of so many, and with ethno-purism and ethno-statism so prominent in both Musk and Trump's mind, you can clearly see that those Cybertrucks, those Teslas are going to be helping ICE or helping CBP in some way. I think we have to go also above the fray and stop giving people the benefit of the doubt. Stop doubting and start listening and asserting what they are until they prove otherwise, because everything that they've shown us up to this moment indicates a fascist and ethno state as a life goal for these individuals. And the mood has certainly changed. In the past 24 hours, people are seeing others be uncomfortable around them because they speak a different language. Mexicans who should not feel like foreigners in this country, because a vast chunk of it was formally Mexico, not formally Mexico. It's debatable whether we can call it something other than the United States, right? The fact that we have over 30 million Mexicans in this country is telling of our cultural and resilience and success, and our lack of hostility towards individuals who are continuously aggravating our communities in different ways, using the government as one of those mechanisms, but then also using economics to exclude us from the productive sectors of the economy. And so I think even with that, there's a discomfort that our numbers are sheerly too great and can displace white people's European Americans from communities and territories and resources that they want for themselves. So I think we need to be very careful of how we move and within this new world of Trump and Musk. And many people want to speculate that they'll have some type of divorce. They won't. They're avid, rabid Nazis. And they have an office that they share together, and they have access to different types of capital. They have access to different types of information technologists. And I think these are the new Nazis, the neo-Nazis, the true neo-Nazis, the techno-fascists that I think the Germans couldn't quite get to the point where they were. But who knows? Really, we have to, as far as like how successful they will be, but certainly they're aiming towards something very totalitarian. And I think we should be mindful of that. We should be mindful of listening to one another, listening to people who have different opinions of ours. There are groups like the PSL, the New African groups. Their name escapes me, but apologies. But these are groups that are great references. Also, we have various nonprofits who are focusing on the civil liberties end. And we just need to be mindful of what we're sharing with these groups, because with these hostile groups via their platforms. Other platforms can be mentioned, but I think this one is the most important one in the short term. Thank you. I know that was a long video, but I hope that this message gives you at least one actionable item. Get the hell off X.